what is the difference between worshiping the Judeo-Christian God and worshiping, for example, the flying spaghetti monster or the cyclopic God? And so a lot of skeptics have flooded the YouTube comment boxes saying, well, I was touched by his noodly appendage. So there's no difference between what I create in my mind and what you have created in your mind. And I wanted to make it very clear that there is a gigantic difference between what I can create in my mind, such as the cyclopic God, and the Judeo-Christian God. Why is it that Christians can say that they believe and have a firm foundation, whereas, for example, the pink unicorn might not and the tooth fairy might not? And here's why, ladies and gentlemen. It's because of. There has to be a good, strong, fundamental, historical, geographical reason for you to believe the things that you do. You can't just put together an idea in your mind and Shazam. You can't. And above all, most importantly, it has to be based on truth. And here's our truthful claim. Christians believe in the 66 books of the Bible because of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, I know that a lot of you right now are saying, ha, circular reasoning. You believe in the Bible because the Bible says so, but it's not that simple. So here's what I'm going to do today, just for the fun of it. I'm going to throw away 65 books of the Bible, and we're just going to say that they do not exist just for the sake of the argument. And what we're going to do is we're going to cling on to one document and one document only, and that is the book of John. The book of John is a document written by a single person. Who wrote the book? It was the disciple of Jesus, the one whom Jesus loved, as he wrote himself, called John. The fact of the matter is that we know that John wrote the book because when we stepped outside of the Bible for a little bit and we look at scholars, we can see that John had a disciple. The name of his disciple was Polycarp. Now, Polycarp had himself a student, a disciple that he took on probably after John, his teacher, died, named Irenaeus. Now, we're talking about historical figures here. We're talking about people that really lived. As Irenaeus is learning from Polycarp about Jesus, about Christianity and the rise of Christianity, Polycarp tells him, and we have this in writing, not in the Bible, it's outside of the Bible. We have in writing from Irenaeus that Polycarp was an eyewitness to John the disciple writing in Ephesus about his eyewitness account of one Jesus of Nazareth. Now, if that doesn't excite you, I don't know what will. So if we're able to establish that John, the disciple who walked with Jesus for a period of his life, actually later wrote about the things that he's seen, what can we take from this to say that the Bible is a book or a series of books that can be indeed trusted? It is because John the disciple tells of one Jesus who said that he would die and in the third day he would raise from the dead. But why should we trust John the disciple? Maybe he lied about the whole thing, right? Isn't that what you're thinking? John just sat down as an old man. He died when he was 100 and something, some believe. And he could have just made up the whole thing. Yes, he could have. Except for the fact that we have 3 other accounts of Jesus. And they all match. Mind you, they didn't have text messaging back then or email or anything like that. Now see, the thing is, John did not look at the book of Matthew or Luke or Mark and copy. He had his own eyewitness account. Now, if you're saying here that John lied or made it all up, then we can just throw away 90% of history right now. Just boom. Plato, Napoleon, Caesar. Okay, so hold on. So you're saying that this guy named John wrote the book of John. And do you have any evidence for this at all? Is there anything right now I need to see? I'm an empirical evidence kind of guy or gal. Well, if you go to Manchester, England right now in the 30s, in the 1930s, they acquired a very important piece of evidence, which is called the John Rylands fragment. You can Google it, you can search it, it is fascinating. Now, why can we point to the John Rylands papyri or fragment as evidence to what we're talking about here? It is because we can see from the dating that this papyrus was circulated around Egypt probably something like 30 years after its composition. And it dates back, are you ready for this? To around 125 AD. Guess when John died? 100 AD. This is 25 years, probably 25 years after. This is probably the first copy of what John the disciple wrote of his eyewitness account. And what is this little fragment? It is of John chapter 18, verses 31 down, and it speaks of Jesus of Nazareth in front of Pontius Pilate. It's ironically the very dialogue between Jesus before Pontius Pilate, where Pilate asks him, "Quid est veritas?" which means, what is truth? And you see, this is the fascinating aspect of it all. We can look at all these fragments, and there are many more, and rows that have been discovered of copies only 100, 200 years later after the original. And when we look at what we have today, the biblical texts, they are the same. They have not changed. Now hold on for just a second. If this fragment is true, and it seems that it is, and it testifies, or it is the writing of a John, who says in the book of John that we have today in the Bible that he was an eyewitness of Jesus of Nazareth and walked with him? Why is it important then that we take any heed to what this Jesus said at all? Now if you ask me, is the Judeo-Christian God the one true God? I can tell you yes. And you'll ask me, but how do you know? Because Jesus, who's in this book of John, was observed by this disciple John very closely, said so. Well, how do you know this Jesus knew what he was talking about? Because he said that he would die and raise from the dead. And then on the third day, he indeed rose from the dead, as was observed by 500 witnesses, including many others. And in the same book of John that we're talking about here, he said, and John heard and later wrote, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." And then something like 30 to 50 years later, we have somebody like Polycarp, who observes and learns from his teacher very closely, who was John the disciple. And he then writes and has a disciple of his own, who is later Irenaeus, one of the fathers of the Christian church, who then writes a book and tells us of these events and how they came down. Do you see a trend here? Do you see a divine hand carefully weaving this together so that I here in this video camera can hand it to you and say, there is a reason for you to believe. And if you still say, no, la, 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 is it now just a matter of pride versus real evidence? So I just really wanted to share with you today that it's not circular reasoning. It's much more than that. And if it is much more than that, as it appears it is, then there's more to Jesus than meets the eye. We Christians believe in the Judeo-Christian God because we have excellent, sound, and logical reasons to believe the things we do. How about you? What's stopping you from taking this step to knowing who Jesus Christ really is?